Hey ladies and gents, it's SpoonyPizzas here and welcome to my review of eFootball 2022 version 1. I've given the game more time than usual before conducting my review because eFootball 2022 has some really good moments and then some really bad moments, at which point I'm ready to put the controller down, but shortly after I get that itch again that I can't wait to scratch and just jump straight back into Dream Team. Let's start with the bad first, shall we? Which has been covered multiple times. Presentation and user interface. Konami, for whatever reason, have never been good at presentation. Some are better in the series than others, but none have ever come close to FIFA. Yet with some magical wand, someone decided that these colours were okay, and there must have been a meeting around the table where everyone agreed to this. Part of me thinks, is this some sort of joke, or is this done as a marketing ploy to get everyone in the community talking about it? Sadly, I don't think it's the latter, and it's genuinely that they think the user interface and the colour scheme is acceptable. Konami, it is simply not acceptable. It's the worst in the series by quite some stretch of the imagination. When you dive into Dream Team and campaigns, things look marginally better, but the player opening packs remind me of something from the PlayStation 2. You can even count the pixels on some of the cards. Once you've matched your opponent and are at the stadium selection, things gradually improve. Not much though, as it doesn't look 4K on the PS5. It just doesn't look crisp or sharp. It's hard to explain. The kit selection is the best I've seen though, and the game plan menu is much more responsive too, but the huge black font when you switch between player condition and player position is really bad. When I'm told to play as a J-League team, to which I have little knowledge, I'm flicking between the two, and it's really hard to see who's on form and what position they play. It's like playing a really bad version of Snap. So overall, the presentation and user interface for me gets a 1 out of 10. Graphics during the matches are a big improvement, especially the turf. It looks much more realistic, the player faces are brilliant, and even those that haven't been scanned in look incredible as well. The crowd graphics at a distance are tragic, but those close up during the cutscene celebrations look pretty good. The volumetric lighting cast on the pitch and the soft shadows from the sun help make the game look gorgeous at times. The stadiums look really good, but in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't look as sharp as I think it could, but maybe that's to help performance, which we saw impacted in the past editions and versions. Whilst the graphics are a huge upgrade to what came out initially, I still wouldn't class these as next generation. Nowhere near. So graphically, I'm going to give this a 7 out of 10. Next up, audio. The menu music isn't really to my taste, and that gets turned off pretty quickly, and the general menu sound is also pretty bad. The commentary hasn't been changed for years and is at times cringeworthy. If you're new to the series, it may be okay as a background filler, but for me personally, who's played the series constantly for years, I've heard it all before, the same lines repeated over and over again, and that usually gets turned off too. The in-game ambient sound from the crowd is okay, but when you hear its competitors' crowd from FIFA, you realise just how far off this game is in terms of quality sound production. There's very few actual chants from the crowd, so this just becomes a buzzing sound that you quickly tune out from, and are only reminded that they exist when they roar when a goal is scored or the ooze from a missed chance. And when the ball hits the back of the net, it sounds good, but I feel like the volume could be adjusted based on the velocity the ball is struck with. So overall, I'm going to give the audio a 3 out of 10. Now what Konami have been renowned for in the PES and eFootball series, which is gameplay. I am so torn on the gameplay. On one hand, I love it, and within just a couple hours I can dislike it as the flaws really begin to show themselves. It's so strange, and for once I believe it's the actual content and game mode that is drawing players back rather than the gameplay. So I'm going to explain why I say that. eFootball 2022 is definitely the slowest version of football we've ever seen in a Konami product, and this is actually a good thing in my opinion. There's far more thought in how you play instead of just get the ball forward as quickly as possible. You can still do that, but you can absolutely suffocate your opponent with a possession style based game, or you can use quick counters to open up those high defensive lines. The way you want to go around winning a match is far more varied than ever before. The first thing you're going to notice is that players feel much more weighty and the speed of passing and the player movement is much slower, adding a far more realistic pace to the matches. However, when you're playing, it doesn't feel slow because it feels like you have little time on the ball once you venture into your opponent's half, because the time it takes your players to control the ball is much increased and the pass error is much higher, especially on level 3 for passing assistance. And that's the beauty of this game. You can work your openings carefully, but the odd long ball over the top can definitely work as well. The physical battles is one area where this game really shines. Now you have access to a shielding button, and depending how long and press the button is, determines how much separation you're willing to allow between your player and the ball to protect it. Press it too much and another player can swoop in and pinch the loose ball, or the defender can move around to steal it away. From the defender's point of view, they now have access to a matchup button. Again, depending how much it's pressed determines how much physical power you're willing to exert on your opponent. However, if you have a lightweight defender and you try to use that against maybe someone like Lukaku or Haaland, just watch as your players bounce off. So you need to understand your players' strengths and your opponent's weaknesses before engaging. Konami have introduced Sharp Touch, which allows you to push the ball out in front of you depending how much the sprint button is pressed. Once mastered, you can control the ball how you want. If you see a player pressing hard, a heavy touch to either side will take him out of the game, or if your opponent is standing off you, maybe a close control touch is all you need. Sprinting with the ball feels just right. Holding sprint too much and you're going to be handing over possession cheaply, but use it in the right moments and you can weave your way through defences at ease. Through balls are far less accurate and can be so wayward, which is definitely a good thing, and it means crossing is definitely a more viable option for scoring goals this year. Shooting feels perfect and any rebounds are dealt with responsively by your striker following up. The goal variety feels far greater in eFootball 2022. I've scored more diving headers in this year's edition than I have the last 2-year editions. Power shots have a real fierceness about them, and those finesse shots can be deadly inside the box as you curl one around the goalkeeper. The general player movement with the left analog stick is either going to annoy and frustrate you with the player weight, or you're going to accept this is making the game far more realistic. When you're winning, it feels fine. When you're losing and chasing the ball, it can feel horrendous because you're trying to get a goal back and it just feels like you don't have complete control of your player's movement. Skill responsiveness is much improved over previous versions, and I think it's the best it's ever been. So whether you're performing a double touch, a roulette or step overs, they feel really good and responsive, and there's a really nice balance to the one-on-one duels between defenders and attackers. No longer can people just hold the pressure button to win the ball back cheaply, because they'll end up stumbling or even falling over if you time the skill just right, which looks and feels great. The AI are definitely not afraid to use skills either. In fact, I don't remember a PES game before where the AI would use skills so much and so frequently, but with the right players and seemingly in the right moments, usually the advanced areas of the pitch, which gives it this added realism factor when it comes to the one-on-one duels against the AI. Defending can be difficult for new players, and as I mentioned, you can't rely on one button anymore. It's more about being positionally correct, bringing players back goal side, tracking runners, and you'll be fine, but sometimes anything can happen. The ball can squirm between your legs if you mistime the matchup button, or maybe the player lacks the skill to actually stop the pass in the first place. There's new player skills like blocking and interceptions, which are vital for stopping the through balls. So when you are building that back line, it's good to have a mix of defenders who can complement each other's weaknesses with their strengths. Player selection from a defending point of view is just okay, whether it's on fully assisted or semi-assisted, both have pros and cons. Semi-assisted gives you greater control, sometimes required to protect you from the long ball kickoff, but there are times when your player is right next to the player with the ball and he's not selected until you press the player select button. But another time you could be in the exact same scenario, the player might get selected, and this inconsistency leaves you wondering whether you should press the player select button or not in that scenario, which can leave you exposed, which is a little frustrating. Player selection with the right stick is very solid, which can help alleviate some of the issues with the player selection. Goalkeepers are the best they've been in a while, and I don't mean that in the way that they're overpowered, but they're the most realistic since PES 2017 and PES 2018. They'll concede the odd long ranger, but will also try to predict where you're going to shoot at close range, sometimes producing an incredible save or leaving part of the net unguarded. Line of sight is still in full effect, so bending a shot around a defender can make the goalkeeper's life very difficult. They have a far more human element to them, and it's just fantastic. Player positioning and off the ball movement is really very good too. Considering the lack of tactical options available, teams move up and down the pitch based on the team style selected, and it looks and flows very naturally, and it's probably the best I've seen in a football game since FIFA 14. Player reaction time is a little bit hit and miss. At times it's absolutely sublime, and then quickly it can shift to the absolute ridiculous, which I'll cover off more in a second. When two players collide, the collisions for the most part look pretty good. There's not too much clipping, which is nice to see considering where the game was at 6 months ago. Ball physics gets slated a lot on my channel, but I don't actually think they're that bad in this game. As mentioned, shots have a nice varied power, dip and swerve to them. The ball looks natural in flight. They're not as good as previous versions for sure, but they're not as bad as some like to make out. Player ID is much improved, but still nowhere near good enough and far off the likes of PES 5. Referees are still useless, but not quite as bad as PES 2021. No longer can you charge into players holding super cancel without conceding a foul, but there are still times where your player gets wiped out and the game carries on as if nothing happened. The refereeing in this game is just so inconsistent. Just look at this. My player gets pushed to the floor, no foul called, no free kick. Literally seconds later, I do exactly the same thing and the referee sprints across to issue a yellow card, and that is just so frustrating. Konami have added stunning kicks this year which add power to your shots and passes. Although making them less accurate, they definitely have a nice balance to them and don't feel overpowered. Besides, they feel really good when you do actually get to pull these off. The goals can look amazing, the passes, splitting defenses apart, they really do have a use, and they are really good to actually use in the game. The omission of the manual controls button is frustrating for those who like to mix in assisted and manual controls like myself, so that is a great loss for me personally. So overall, the gameplay doesn't sound that bad. Well, when everything is flowing smoothly, it's perfect, but too frequently, it's not flowing smoothly at all. And I'm going to show you those imperfections which are really holding this game back from being just bloody brilliant. The first is the annoying stop-start animation every time there's a tackle or interception. Once you notice it, you can't unnotice it. Players, as mentioned before, are much heavier. The last thing you need are players not reacting to interceptions, blocks, or even goalkeeper saves. Just look at this clip. Every time a player makes a tackle, there's a slight pause in all the players around the ball. Then there are moments when you experience severe button delay. No amounts of button presses allow me to clear this, and you might think, it's just lag. It's not, because I have another example here. Just check out this offline gameplay footage where I clearly press the shoot button and the striker does nothing. Now let's take a look at the poor defensive legend AI who decides to turn whilst running, giving him no chance of getting back to defend as it slows his speed down, and it doesn't get much better on the attacking side either. Firstly, he could square this to a teammate, but then this player decides to watch the ball run out of play when he clearly has an empty net to slot the ball home to. The inconsistency never stops. Here is a clip of the AI actually being smart, realising he's going to be caught by the defender, has a crack from range which actually goes in. I've even seen players do unnecessary skill moves, which I can only assume is based on the player ID, as Figo here goes around an invisible opponent. And then on the other hand, you see some really nice touches and attention to detail as players hurdle challenges, and quick free kicks look more natural than before as players shuffle to their positions. And I also love the fact that not all players can pull off skill moves and may result in them miscontrolling the ball. This clip here sums up the game perfectly, from the ridiculous to the sublime. No idea what my goalkeeper is actually doing, almost conceding a goal, and then slick passing, quick passing up the other end, and I end up scoring a goal. Honestly, I really don't know if I love or hate the gameplay. It never feels like you truly have control of your players. The issue I have is that parts of the match feel like it's being controlled automatically, players driven on rails towards the ball. If I was to score the gameplay, I'd probably give it a 6 out of 10. There's just too many glaring issues, and the stop-start animation for every block, interception or goalkeeping parry has to be eradicated in the next update. I can deal with players turning like oil tankers because that gives skills a chance to work, slows down the pace of the game and adds realism. This is definitely not a single player experience. Yes, you can play single player matches in the main game mode, which I'll cover off in a minute, but if you want to play as actual club teams, there's only 9 teams available and only 5-minute halves, which is disgusting, and there's no need for it, Konami. Yes, you can access more clubs in training mode, but it feels awful. There's no crowd noise. Now let's talk about where the game really shines, Dream Team. It's a different take on My Club and FIFA Ultimate Team, and it just works so well. You start off with a bunch of made up players, and you can choose any player you want to sign from most of the famous leagues in the world using in-game earned GP. Only if you want legends like Figo or Maradona do you have to pay microtransactions for, so there's nothing to stop you forming a formidable side other than time. You can also pick a manager who has various player development benefits and preferred playstyles. Once you've assembled your side and manager, you play events to earn more GP. However, once an event is complete, you can only tend to earn 100 GP once you've completed it, which isn't much considering the highest GP player right now costs 1.2 million. It's a fantastic idea and it's so well implemented, which is the biggest draw for eFootball 2022 and has got everyone playing and talking about it. Sure, there could be more filters for searching players and the menu's less clunky, but you can tell it's been adapted from mobile use once it arrives. To conclude, I'm playing a game which I can thoroughly enjoy and haven't revisited PES 2021 since I've got it. So it must be doing something right. But after a few matches, it is hard to stick it out for a long period of time due to the frustrations already mentioned in this review. eFootball 2022 definitely has the right vision and direction, but right now I feel like it's poorly executed. Tighten up those main pain points mentioned in this review and I think we'll have something special, especially in the next 2 to 3 years. It's a solid foundation on a brand new engine and I'm really excited for what the future holds right now, but it's impossible to recommend it for a single player experience. But if you're willing to give Dream Team a try, that's definitely where the fun starts. Thank you guys for watching my review of eFootball 2022. Would love to hear your thoughts on the game and what you make of it, and you may even feature in a future video. Anyway, that's all from me, ladies and gents. Take care and goodbye.